quite a crowd tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been really such a pleasure to get to know you over the past year or so, as well as your work. I'd love to just jump right in with the title of the show, Composed. What felt important about that word in exhibiting this work?
I want to thank everybody for coming. This is so much fun. There's nothing, without an audience, there's nothing happening. And I'm sure we'll address that later also. I mean, that's the thing with art. There's the idea out there, then there's the person that gives the idea form, and then there's the person that looks at it and alters that form, bringing their own ideas to it, right? So it takes more than one person to make art. So composed, I think, obviously there's multiple meanings to that word. It could be, of course, things being put together, but also mentally being put together, or feeling composed or being composed. It has a bit of a value of calmness and balance to it. So I guess I was thinking of both. I mean, a lot of my compositions, they almost compose themselves, or I try to not always control everything, but I try to go back and forth between things happening and me steering them on and editing and finding kind of a path forward. But also, so the show is about that kind of act of composing where things kind of to a degree happen by chance, but then also you have to let them happen by chance. But at the same time, as you're doing that, you're composing yourself and you're mentally, I guess, in a state of being composed. So that's kind of what I was getting at with that title, yeah.
You described the exhibition as a meditation on being of the natural world. Are there specific things that you're thinking about when you first began these works, or something that sort of joins them all together?
I think being of the natural world, I mean, first of all, I think the shapes to me are very organic. Some of these things seem anthropomorphic. I mean, they almost seem like characters. So a friend of mine, she comes to the studio and she likes to give them names, like they're people. And I can relate to that. Some of them, there's one and she keeps calling him Ernest, and I'm like, I'm not sure about that. But I think, they do have characters, so. But also the shapes, you go to the beach, in Florida, we don't really have rocks, but we have shells. But lots of places you have these rounded rocks. I think everybody kind of can see that if you enjoy the natural world, you're familiar with these kinds of shapes. There's also this kind of lunar shapes, and then often what happens is, you have a shape and it's an interesting shape, and then you cut it at a certain angle, and it again looks familiar from something you see in nature. When the light hits the moon and you have a sickle, okay, we all know it's a ball. Well, some of it know it's a ball, doesn't know it's a ball. And then when you light it up a certain way, it turns into a completely different shape in the sky. So I guess, the realities of these physical changes around us are a huge topic for me, I guess, And it's also about seeing rather than thinking of those shapes, like when you really look at them and you see them from different perspectives. And I'm just fascinated, I guess, with shapes and different angles and what happens to them when you cut them and when you slice them and when you squash them, so yeah.
Yeah, I know you talk a lot about reflection in your work and in your life, and finding these different shapes, whether they present as figurative or even architectural. How do you sort of manage that balance between suggestion and abstraction?
Well, I think it's, I used to not really understand this thing. People always say, art is a universal language, and And we all understand each other through art, and I'm thinking, no, we don't. Like, I don't understand that at all. But now I'm kind of coming around to that more, because I feel like, for example, when you travel and you travel to a place where you don't really understand what's going on in that place at all, but then you look at the art and you're like, oh yeah, I get this. Like, I get what they were after, and I feel it. I feel the atmosphere of it. So I do think, like this one that has this kind of almost moon-like sickles in it. I have a wall piece at home that I have on the porch that just has all this kind of planetary looking shapes, not really, but kind of. But then this artist came and she said, God, if that was my piece, I would call it spheres. And I'm thinking, but spherical in the sense of, and I was like, yeah, obviously she kind of immediately saw what I was thinking. I do think every shape, everything has so much association with it. That's what I was saying earlier. It takes, the artist, but then it also takes the viewer, right? You need somebody to see it and bring their experience and their baggage to it, and maybe they read something totally different in it, or maybe they read the same thing in it. But I think, even when I'm teaching pottery, you take I don't know what you guys know about pottery, but so let's say you throw a bowl and then you have to later turn it around and you have to finish the foot, right? So you can make a really wide foot, or you can make that foot, so I like to demonstrate to my students, make that foot smaller and smaller. The character of the bowl changes completely. You start out with something that looks, like all-American, rural, and then you end up with something that looks Japanese, and it looks like it's from some kind of tea ceremony, and that's all because you're taking millimeters off the bottom, and the proportions change so dramatically, and everybody in the room can see it. They can all see that you just took something American and made it look Asian, or so there is certainly, we do have the same, and even if it's not the same, it doesn't matter, but like millimeters matter. You can see the whole character, the stance, the attitude of the thing change. Or you put a handle on a cup, it can look like totally off whack, it can look really restrained, it can look generous, it can look inviting, it can look kind of spiky. So I think we all know this, but we don't really necessarily spend time to think about it.
Well, that sort of brings me to my next question. You have such an interesting background. You grew up in Germany, you spent 20 plus years in Asia, you studied in Detroit. How have all those different places sort of influenced your practice and your approach to art making?
Well, I think what I have really, one thing I have learned like as a person is you can't, which I'm sure all of us after the age of 40 have arrived there, like you can't really control your environment, you can't really control other people's reactions. The only thing you can really control is your own reaction to what happens, right? And I feel that's kind of an art to me. I like to also let the materials contribute. I like to work with what I've got rather than control and create everything from scratch. If something feels right, or like I push it, and sometimes it goes in the bin, and sometimes something unforeseen happens, and I'd rather like work with something unforeseen than map out exactly what I'm going to do, and then check my steps off the list and end up with something that looks exactly what I had hoped for. For a while I was painting portraits, and they were pretty, looking like what I wanted them to look like, but it became a little bit of, painting is, none of what I say, of course, is for other people, like that's just me, but it became almost like a little bit of paint by numbers, because I already knew what I wanted the result to look like, so it was like, I already know what it's going to look like, so why am I even doing it after a while, Whereas if you kind of let things get a little out of control and then you rein them in. I mean, I make sketches and I kind of roughly know where I'm going, but I do like, and sometimes things happen from accidents, happy accidents, but I guess I'm just not so much about the control. And I think if you I grew up in a very kind of controlled environment, like a very, rigid sounds so negative, but very, very structured. And, I ended up in India for 17 years, and my family was just like, oh my God, what is she thinking? But, it's just so different and so unpredictable to me, and I just kind of throve. What's the past tense of thrive? I don't know. Anyway, I really liked that. Yeah.
Well, it's so interesting because when I sort of met with you recently, I didn't realize that painting was actually what you started with. And I'm wondering if that sort of paint by numbers attitude that maybe started to come was resulted in some of these more abstract works.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, also, in the paintings, and again, this is just, for me, like I love a lot of paintings that are highly figurative and narrative, and I'm a huge fan of a lot of that stuff. I guess I'm just a little more fuzzy than that, so I do like to be more descriptive than prescriptive, I guess. So rather than maybe showing the viewer necessarily what I want them to see, I would rather have them kind of discover it, if that makes sense. So, like how, okay, this is a bad analogy maybe for some of you, but grammar, you can either have prescriptive grammar where you tell everybody how they're supposed to talk, or you can have descriptive grammar where you're just observing how people are talking. Well, I think that's a lot more interesting to me. So I like my process to be a little more descriptive. What happens, I just incorporate it. And then the same with the people that watch, that look at it. I can control what you see. Like you might have a totally different experience from me, or you definitely do, and you will see something different. And and that's good for me.
Awesome. You also mentioned that normally you exhibit your paintings and your ceramics separately. So what was this experience like, putting this together with the two of them in conversation?
Yeah, I really liked it. I mean, I have to say what I used to do is, for 5 years I would just paint, and then I would show paintings, and then I would be so sick of it, and I would say, painting is just stupid, who does that? And then I would switch over and go to ceramics, and I did a lot of kind of more, they were not really functional, but they were more like vessel shapes, which I love that still. And I would do that, and then I would show that, and then I would be like, yeah, this is stupid. Like painting is so much more interesting because I can use colors. So I would go back to that, but it was also kind of this headspace and physical space thing. I would do one or the other, and now I guess the intervals are closer because now in the summer I end up doing painting because I do it inside and it kind of happens like that. And then in the winter I do ceramics because I do that outside. And but of course, while I'm doing the painting, I'm thinking about the exact same things that I'm thinking about when I'm doing the ceramics. So in the end, when I'm done with my summer of painting, I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait to, get my hands in the clay. So they're working together a lot better than they used to. So I'm happy to be able to put them together. So it's exciting for me. Yeah.
I think as someone with a background in ceramics, I can understand a little bit more the throwing it in the bin for the ceramics element. But what about for the painting? How do you sort of navigate that balance between control and chance?
I never have to throw them in the bin somehow. They're not so binnable anyway. You can always turn around and pile more paint on them, or not turn them around, or just rotate them, or print something on them. Or that's the nice thing about the non-figurative painting too. Although I have to say that, you know, things can get muddy, so you have to, but it's the same in clay. You just don't want to overwork and overthink. Like, I think a tired painting is not a good thing. So you have to be careful. I mean, I think that's a main challenge, I think, with painting for me always has been, that you have to know when to stop, you know? And that's where the teaching really helped, because you teach, I mean, you've taught, you know, you teach students how to paint, and you're like, oh, stop there, and they don't want to stop, and they're like, I'm taking this from you, and you're not going to get it back, and we'll look at it again later. And so I think you kind of learn, you know, like sometimes too much, trying to control things too much is your worst enemy, and I think teaching you really learn that, because you see people do it all the time, and you're like, don't do that, so it helps. Yeah.
I mean, how do you know when to stop a painting? Because you're a very intuitive artist, as you mentioned, and I think with ceramics it's a little different, but maybe that's my bias, I don't know.
Well, you know what? With ceramics that can also happen, but with the painting, how do I know? Well, sometimes I think this is just really not good, and then I put it aside, and then because I know this about myself, that, you know, sometimes I did have too much of a notion maybe of what I wanted, and it's not conforming with it. But I think that's the thing about art. You have to keep like nimble. You have to always, you know, be ready to throw out your judgment and, you know, like look at it with different eyes. And I think that's the challenge, and that's what makes it interesting. Yeah, I think, how do I know? I mean, sometimes I just really just put it aside, and sometimes I have the urge. I had this one painting that was all blue. I still can't look at it. You saw it. I still can't look at it without thinking I have to have some pink in there. But then I'm just waiting to see whether that urge will maybe subside. But I have a feeling that it'll have a warm color in it eventually. But sometimes you just don't know, and then you just have to put it aside and wait and see.
Is there a particular work in this exhibition, painting or ceramics, that surprised you when it came out, or gave you a little extra delight?
Well, they're all, you know, none of them were really so preconceived. Actually, that painting back there, the one that's kind of like a cave, I guess, with all this, it looks like an underwater scene. I had an idea. I wanted this kind of cave-like painting, and that went through so many iterations. Like, I made probably 3 or 4 smaller pieces before that, and I could not get that feeling, and so I was really happy suddenly, and that one, it almost came by itself. Like, suddenly I was, now I've got it. So I have a couple of really awful things sitting sitting somewhere, which probably I'll eventually get out and do something with, but I was really happy that I just got, like, I felt like, yes, this is what I was trying to do. So, and it's quite actually different from, I just wanted this feeling of this kind of sheltered place that you can look out from, and I couldn't get it. And I couldn't get it, but then I got it, so I was thrilled. And then actually this little one I'm very happy with, and I don't know why it ended up looking like a watermelon to me, but I guess that's the colors, but then I thought, oh, that's like a flavorful painting, you know. I was kind of surprised, like I can taste that painting, so I was happy with that. So I don't know, you know, for different reasons. There's one painting in here, I won't call any names, that when I made it, I was like, oh, this is not very nice. And then later I looked at it and I thought, oh, this is great. What was I thinking? This is really great. So I don't know, you know, you have to sometimes give the painting some time and yourself some time. Before you realize like what it even is, because sometimes it just doesn't coincide with the original intent you had, but that doesn't mean it's bad. It just means, you know, it needs a bit of, you need to kind of let it sit for a bit. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the choice for the cotton as your canvas on the paintings, and then what you're using to create these very subtle textures and colors?
Well, some of it, I mean, there are two very different fabrics here. Actually, this one is a thicker one, and it's quite crude. It's basically cheap fabric. It's thick and crude. And I did not prime it, so the watered down paint flows really nicely on it, and then I can layer on it. Some of the larger paintings are much thinner, kind of almost like a muslin. And so I used some dyes on some of them, which of course really run well. That one back there, that kind of orange, the Summer Thoughts it's called, that is a very thin muslin, and you can see that I folded it at first. I wanted like a strong structure, so I folded it, and I almost did like a tie-dye or a batik, I used dyes, and then I used watered down acrylics, but because the fabric was so thin, it can really permeate. If you have a thick fabric, so I washed it first too, so it wouldn't have any sizing in it, and then it just really, you can really bleed through it very nicely, so, yeah.
Really interesting, almost like making textiles.
Yeah, very, actually when I was a little kid, my mother had this friend that made these, she batiqued paper. I think it's some real thing that has a real name, and it's something Asian, I don't know. But, I remembered, so I sometimes remember these funny things I did as a kid. So I was like, I remember folding them into triangles and dipping them into dye, and they were almost like textiles. So that came back to me, and I thought, I can try that. And that's kind of how that happened.
Yeah. Really cool. Well, I know for a fact there are more than a couple ceramic nerds in the audience tonight. So hoping you can share a little insight into the surface of the works. Particularly the lime wash and the rejection of glaze almost.
Well, it's not that I never use glaze, but in these pieces I don't have glaze. It's just I use a bit of plaster, a bit of paint, and then a bit of wax. The white stoneware is nice too. I guess I just really like this stark white for these pieces. I think it all, it depends on the piece I'm working on. I wouldn't, but that's how that's done, yeah.
And everything primarily you create on the wheel.
Yeah, I pretty much do everything on the wheel, and I have this discussion with my students sometimes who get really annoyed with the wheel, and they're like, hand building is so much easier, but it really is not. To me, I feel like once you made the investment in learning how to throw on the wheel, you can just, have all these gorgeous shapes in no time flatten, and you can do stuff with them. So I also like the physics of it. I never get bored with this idea that it just spins so fast, and every movement you do is just amplified by this centrifugal force thing. So I really like it. Also, it's a little helter-skelter, and I like that too, obviously. Yeah.
It sort of harkens back to your interest in nature as well, the sort of spinning wheel.
Yeah. I think it's just I'm just really into primitive processes, I guess, drippy, primitive. I like really simple tools. I'm not one of these people, I love cool tools, but I personally always use the same three things. I don't know, I just like low-tech stuff, I guess, yeah.
Well, you mentioned Noguchi and Juan Arp as being sort of a couple of influences that I can see very visually in this work. Can you talk about when you encountered their work and how we might see them here?
See them in my sculptures or see them in the vicinity? Oh, okay. Jean Arp, or Hans Arp as we call him in Germany, of course, Hans Arp. There's actually, my hometown museum has a sizable collection of his sculptures I would like to point out here, and so I've kind of always seen that stuff. Noguchi I came to much later. I actually saw, I knew he was there, but I did not know much about him, but I saw an amazing retrospective in Cologne like maybe 5 years ago or something? Joel will know, I don't know.
Yeah, 3, 4.
5 years ago maybe. And it was amazing, and he, I guess it's that whole, how far can you go abstracting something and everybody can still see stuff in it, which you can go pretty darn far. So I just love both of them. I love them for their abstraction, and then Noguchi is so interesting because then he builds playgrounds, and he does all sorts of things with these. If you're not familiar with his work, look him up, Isamu Noguchi. He has a little museum, his former studio in Long Island.
City, yeah.
So amazing, and he does everything from playgrounds to carved stone sculptures, plaster, found objects. Anything. He's just a creative powerhouse, just amazing. And Jean Arp, Hans Arp, he really his abstractions get so abstract and so simple and so bold and out there. I just love them. And
would you ever consider making something more monumental, like on those scales that you're talking about?
Well, I'm not considering carving any stones. I am pretty firm on that. That's where I draw the line. No stones will be carved. Florida doesn't even have stones. I don't know if there's stones here.
I can hook you up with a guy.
Wood, I'm more interested in wood, I think. But what I like about clay so much is that it's so malleable. It just feels so nice. I don't know. Monumental, I have worked on that, and I will continue to work on that. There's actually some people in this audience that kind of pushed me over the edge with that, and they're like, we need it, but it needs to be 6 feet tall. And I'm like, okay. But it worked out to be really fun. I really enjoyed it. So yeah, I can see that. Yeah, but then I was looking at fiberglass, but I just hate it. I just cannot. Again, for me, that doesn't mean I hate all fiberglass sculptures, but I guess I'm also like a little bit of an environmentalist, Nazi kind of person, so I personally am not going to work with fiberglass, but great things can be achieved with it, but I'm not probably going to do that.
Are there any other artists or even musicians, writers, philosophers that work sort of influence your creative practice?
I am in my head in a constant dialogue with half of the half of the world. So I don't know. Something different all the time. You read. Sometimes you read something's a stupid thing on Instagram, and you're like, oh yeah, that's really profound. And then I don't know. There's so much stuff all the time that you can work with. Actually, that painting behind you, that really tall one, there's a painting again in my hometown, the same place that has all the Jean Arp. They also have this guy Runge, Philipp Otto Runge, and so there's this dichotomy in German culture. So there's the neoclassicists or the classicists that are very rigid, mathematical, physics, classical education, all that, they push that. And then as a reaction, and I think this is common in many cultures, as a reaction you had the romanticists that want to do everything from the gut and not necessarily being all cerebral about it. And I'm always fascinated with that. Actually, we can see it a little bit right now. I'm interested with how that manifests in culture. How you have the school of, control, math, rigidity, and more like magical thinking. So this is this kind of, I was thinking about this romantic painter who is always wallowing in the pastels and he had this piece called Morning, so this is also called Morning, and the colors are very like that. but then I use this kind of very symmetrical structure in it. And his paintings are also very symmetrical, but of course they're full of little angels and lilies and all that. So yeah, I mean, you know, no idea kind of comes out of nowhere. It's all, you're always talking to someone. Yeah.
Well, and you also talk a lot about sort of finding inspiration in the mundane, but also in the sublime.
Right.
So, you know, what are some ordinary things that are like really revving you up?
Well, ordinary things, of course, I mean, they're everywhere. I mean, it's just like you see, I mean, just look at the shadows that these things create on the walls, you know, like wherever you look, there's so much to see. I mean, we have these white curtains and we have these white things at our house. What are they called? Roman blinds? I think Roman blinds. And then you see the leaves coming through. I mean, there's just the way that light interacts with objects, and screens are not screens, or anything really. You just look around. I mean, you don't even have to go outside. It's everywhere. Just the way light interacts with shapes, and you know, we decorate our houses, but when we take everything out of the house, it also looks fantastic because you just have the different planes interacting with the shades of light and the light coming in through the windows, and it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the one piece that was outside in your garden.
Yeah.
It looked so great, like in the lush green area.
Yeah, it's just, and then, you know, you go outside and you look at some of these seed pods and, you know, all this stuff, fruit, I mean, astonishing, right? The shapes of them, yeah.
So clearly nature has, you know, a significant influence on your work, but it seems like more you're responding to nature than necessarily reproducing it. Is that fair?
Well, in this body of work, I would say that's fair. I mean, there's also, you know, things I also have pieces where I'm really incorporating, you know, certain pod shapes or celestial kind of things. Yeah.
Being in Sarasota, do you spend a lot of time at the beach or out in nature?
Yes, of course. Yeah, that's the place to be, I think. Yeah.
Well, definitely. I mean, I think with this body of work, you're really asking the viewer to sort of slow down and take a closer look at the work. Is this something that has been with you forever, or some sort of new element in your work recently?
I don't know. Again, maybe this may be too general, but I think when you make art, I have to slow down. Like, I would think if you look at art, although I can look at art really fast, but yeah, you should probably slow down. You should probably slow down, yeah. I mean, I think that's where the title composed comes from, you know. You know, who you are a composition of, you know, you're like one of these stacked things. You're composed of all of your experiences, right? And the experience of a sculpture, like I was saying at the very beginning, or any art, you know, you have the artist making it, you have the thing itself, you have the audience a person looking at it. So the thing constantly gets recomposed through all these different lenses, and yeah.
That's great. I mean, it sort of goes back to your sort of meditation, right? And
right.
Meditating on the process.
Mm-hmm.
Is there one piece in the show that, you know, outside of that painting, maybe one of the sculptures that you're really like proud of and you hope the viewer takes away with you?
You know, I mean, I'm happy with all of them, and otherwise I wouldn't be here. And I guess I have favorites sometimes, but they shift too. Like I was saying about this one painting that shall not be named, that I did not like for a while. But you know, the favorites go in and out. Because I was like thinking vastly different things also, and for all of them. So sometimes I come back to an idea and I think, oh yeah, I painted that. Oh yeah, that was really good. And then other times I'm maybe not so interested in that particular concept.
Yes. Well, are there any sort of new ideas brewing in the studio? I know you've been traveling and you just got back, but anything new we should look out for on the horizon?
Well, I have a bunch of things I have a little bit of that, I'm all over sometimes with my thoughts, but yeah, I have a few things. So I have one series of things that I showed you, I think, where I hope I get to do that again this winter, where I went and did some wood firings, and they're kind of like very galactic pieces. And then I have a whole series that I want to continue on where I create things in pairs and they're kind of moving together. There's more, it's just not on the tip of my tongue. Oh yeah, then I have this kind of I have this interest in, how thoughts work and memories work. So this piece there is kind of on the way we see things, how you, depending on, somebody did me the great favor of pointing out that it looked like that it looked like a thing that they put drinks in, those plastic things. So now I can't unsee that, of course. But to me it was more like you have so many different lenses you can look at something through, and so I'm just interested in the way thinking works and how you can go down a rabbit hole, but then you can also get yourself back out of that rabbit hole and go into a different one. And there's I think an architecture to thinking that is biological, like we're certainly wired to think in certain ways, and our moods are inspired by our biology, like hormones, whatever. I think it's to me interesting to explore a little bit the architecture of thinking, and so I have been working on that, but I'm not going to say much more about that.
Stay tuned for that one. Well, we'll open it up for Q&A from the audience, but is there one sort of lasting element that you hope the viewers take with them after viewing the whole show?
I think I would like you to get, and we've put the chairs everywhere now, so it doesn't have the same impact, I think.
It'll be back tomorrow.
So you can come back and see it in its glorious original shape, but I want, I guess, to communicate a feeling of, composed, like balance, like, I guess what we've been talking about is, in a way, it's balance, because you're trying to control something that cannot really be controlled, so you have to strike a balance of accepting what's coming and manipulating it. Or, I think I'd like to have people get a feeling of serenity and balance, I guess, when they look at the show.
Very nice. Well, thank you so much. And like
You're
I said,
welcome.
we will open it up for any questions from the audience. Dee?
So I love your post on Instagram where you show the piece and the shadow that the piece casts.
Oh, yes.
I love that. So do you ever use that shadow to compose your pieces? Do you ever play with the piece with shadow before you say, I'm done, I'm not adding another layer to this, or I can't quite get the balance right, cast a shadow on it?
Not really. I use the, you know what, I'm always thrilled with the shadows. I don't really think about them beforehand, and then when I build something, then I start lighting it up, and I'm like, oh, this is so nice. This is so exciting. And that's what the fun thing is, oftentimes I don't just work on one piece, but I work on a whole bunch of them. And then so to see them together and the shadows they cast on each other, it's so much fun.
I love it. I just love it.
Yeah.
It's like another dimension that you hadn't even been thinking about when you created.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun.
Question.
Mm-hmm.
Anja, can you talk a little bit more about the process of color? I know you talked about inspired by nature, reading here in Sarasota, the sky and clouds, but also just is an intentional process to this particular series with the color. Was it just by chance, or was it doing your sketches over and over and you kind of came to the conclusion, oh, I like this color palette?
I guess I've been painting for a long time, and I know what I guess I like to create certain atmospheres, and I react quite strongly, I guess, to color. I go into a show and I can see there's some good art there, but the color is not friendly to me. I don't even know how to say it, but I have a certain, I guess, relationship. The color has to be friendly to me, I guess. I don't know how else to say it. I have this very green painting that you were not about, and I am really happy with it. But everybody has I think it's very subjective. I would say the color, I did teach color for a long time, but in the end, I'm not sitting there going, should I, use a secondary or a tertiary color here? But I'm just like, oh yeah, this needs whatever. It needs a really pale blue that looks like early morning by the river, kind of pale. Or I go with my gut mostly, I would say.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so this is interesting. I'm just looking at this, and some of these paintings are oriented different.
Oh, are they?
Yes, they are.
That's okay.
So, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, any comment on that?
That's interesting. Yeah, I find that interesting also. But I think if it's these are abstract. If it's a good painting, it should really work. And that is actually so strange because Christina said, oh, you have so many vertical paintings. Are there any of them that we could use horizontal? And we tried on a couple, and no, absolutely not. But some of these are totally reversible. Like that one back there that looks like it has this very deliberate little sun, the orange one. It works great the other way around. So that's like... But then I have this portrait of my son at home that every now and then I turn it upside down. He was laying on a blanket. So when I first painted him, I painted him with his head down. I was like looking at them, and he was laying like that. And so I painted him upside down. And then I was like later, that's like kind of silly. So then I turned the right side up, and then maybe a couple months ago, I think. Joel must think I'm crazy, but then I turned the right side up again. So I think it's okay. Like that's probably a good sign if the composition works. But sideways, not so much. Like I think we tried it on that, it was awful. And that one obviously you can't do it on. So some are pretty limited with that, but others you could probably turn them backwards and put the face to the wall, and they would also be But my son was saying, oh, this back, I like the back better than the front. Leave me alone.
No, but that's particularly because of the dyes and...
Yeah.
So
some of them have...
Because much of this canvas is very thin, and then the use of dye and very fluid paints, it comes through on the back in an interesting way.
Yeah, some of them are really interesting from the back.
They did on glass, and they should reverse that.
Yeah, reverse.
Oh yeah, reverse. Yeah. I have done that too. That's also very fun. I recommend it. Yeah.
Any other questions for Anja? Yeah.
I see for sure what your concept is. I think it really comes through in the work, and I love the gentleness of the forms and the nature, the way you're referring to nature, and it really, I see the shells and the stone, and even that thing where, like time wears down the stone after, some of these curves feel like, many years have gone by forming that piece somehow in nature. but I also see humor, and you have a great sense of humor, and some of them in their anthropomorphic way kind of feel like people with little eyes that are watching, and then of course in your studio you have some that are really, make you giggle a little bit.
Yeah.
So do you see that too?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I talked to some of them. That's alarming.
But what are the little holes you have, or is that just happenstance? The eyes?
Well, the little holes are, of course, it's again, there's this whole world out there, and we have these eyes to see it with, and then you have a whole other composition, a free little composition right there in your piece, I guess that's what that's called Valle, that piece with the as my actually was one of my students said, it looked like the tin can holder, the drink holder. That is that same idea that it's so crazy. You create a little viewfinder. I used to do that with my high school students. Create a little viewfinder. You have this still life. You create the little viewfinder. You look through it. And you see all these vastly different compositions. You move it over by a millimeter, everything changes. I mean, it's fascinating to me. So why would I not want to incorporate that in my sculpture? You can look through there and see the other person that is looking at it from the other side. Or remember when we had the show at Spaces and Jeffrey had this perfectly round paintings, and you could look through my sculpture and look at his painting, and I just loved that. I thought it was great.
All right, well, thank you so much, and thank you all so much.
Thank you so much for coming.